Keegan Murray didn't have to win Rookie of the Year for the world to know that the Sacramento Kings made the absolute right choice, drafting him with the 4th overall pick. On today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast, Keegan's coach from Iowa, Fran McCaffery, is back with me on the podcast to talk about Keegan's rookie season, provide his perspective, and also talk a little bit about his brother, Kris Murray, who is entering the draft and could potentially be on the Kings draft board. You are listening to Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all off-season long. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same thing with your vehicle. So for parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer for ABC 10 News. And I had the pleasure of speaking with Coach McCaffery right before the draft when we were talking about a bunch of different prospects and getting his perspective on Keegan Murray. And then right after the draft was over, I spoke with Coach McCaffery again, had him back on the podcast. And that was my favorite episode because I brought up to him this idea about Keegan having a low ceiling. And being more of a safe pick compared to a Jaden Ivey, who was kind of more flashy and exciting that a lot of people thought should have been the pick at number 4. And Fran McCaffery thought that was just absurd. He thought it was absurd that Keegan had a low ceiling or a lower ceiling, and he always believed that Keegan could be a star. And while he isn't a star yet in Sacramento, he came in and as a rookie played his role to perfection. Coach McCaffery also talked about how great his fit was in Sacramento, and that turned out to be true. So I've been eager to have Coach McCaffery on again. I didn't want to bug him during the season because of all the great work that he's doing over at the University of Iowa. But as you're going to hear in this interview, he kept close tabs on what the Kings were doing. Actually went to a Kings road game at one point to watch Keegan in person. I also met Coach McCaffery in person at NBA Summer League in Las Vegas last year and got to speak with him a little bit there as well. So he's a phenomenal man, a phenomenal coach, and I'm so pleased to have him back here on the Locked On Kings podcast to talk about his former player and Kings rookie, soon to be second-year player, and the most successful three-point shooting rookie in NBA history, Keegan Murray. Locked On Kings has been blessed to have the head coach of Iowa men's basketball, Fran McCaffery, on a couple of times before and just after Keegan Murray was drafted here in Sacramento. Now we have a full year of context where Keegan Murray was not only as a rookie, a starter on a playoff team. He's hit the most three-pointers as a rookie in NBA history, quickly become a fan favorite here. And Coach McCaffery, I know a lot of Iowa fans were watching Kings basketball this year, following Keegan. Of course, you have all your responsibilities over there, your busy schedule. I'm curious how closely you were paying attention to Kings basketball with the stuff Keegan was doing.
Well, I kept very close watch. I mean, obviously he's one of my favorites. Just an absolute delight to coach. Obviously his brother was on the team and he was watching very closely. So his family was splitting time being here and of course being in Sacramento, and then his sister was playing in high school. Kenya and his dad was coaching that team for her, so that was quite a busy family. But Kris had a fabulous year for us. I couldn't be more proud of Keegan. I think we all knew after how he played in the summer, Matt, that he was going to be special. It was only a matter of time, and I think one of the things that you and I talked about last year, I think he was a really good fit for the personnel that they had, and for coach. I mean, when I spent some time with him, he was like, I really think Keegan and Kevin Huerter in particular were great fits for the other pieces that they had, and I think that proved to be true, and that's why they did so well, and he was coach of the year. So I'm thrilled for the entire franchise, quite frankly.
One of the things that we discussed in the second time we visited and chatted was one of the, I guess, criticisms around Keegan in the draft was that he didn't have as high of a ceiling as other prospects like a Jaden Ivey necessarily. He was more of like a safer pick. And you thought that was absolutely absurd because of just the skill set that he has and how much he can get better. And here he is coming into the league, and even as not a primary focal point of the offense, like I mentioned, he hit more threes than any NBA player in history. A lot of that had to do with his fit. But over the course of his season, we saw him develop as a rebounder, saw him develop and attack the basket more aggressively. Every time that Mike Brown would bring him something to work on, he seemed to really take that to heart, and you would see immediate results from that. So I think that speaks to a little bit of your comments about the ceiling. But does that surprise you at all, how much he showed right off the bat and how much growth he showed in just his first season?
Not surprised at all. He's an incredibly mature individual with a very mature game. You pointed out a couple things, and you were absolutely right. Like, he's also a really good post-up player, like a really good post-up player. There's not a lot of posting up in the pros, and and obviously Sabonis is somebody you're going to post up quite a bit. Be able to play through him. But if you want to post up Keegan, he's really good. I mean, he's always been a three-point shooter. He can take it off the glass, bring it coast to coast. I do think he can be an elite defender. And I think the beautiful thing for him this year was how seamlessly he fit into that roster. And we said that a minute ago, but what's most important is he accepted the role that that Coach Brown defined for him. A lot of guys like, wait, I want to do more. I can do more. And, maybe he'll prove that over time, but they have some serious weapons offensively. And so those guys are going to get shots. And, I went to the Mavs game down in Dallas. He scored 11 straight and really didn't shoot that much in the second half. Fox went crazy but I mean, it might be Harrison Barnes. I mean, it could be Malik Monk. It could be Sabonis. There's so many options that they have. And Keegan just accepts whatever role they give him. Guard this guy. Okay. Spot up. Okay. Now we'll get you more involved. But you're right. I mean, he's an elite rebounder, and he'll rebound his position, whether he's playing the small forward or the power forward position. He'll guard anybody from, 6 feet to 7'2" with his length. And it's going to be a lot of fun for Sacramento fans to just watch him grow and develop, because I think he's definitely going to be an all-star at some point.
We just conducted exit interviews, and he was one of the guys that we talked to, and he brought up the fact that his time playing and kind of replacing or playing next to Luka Garza really helped him with how he kind of adapted and accepted his role in Sacramento with fitting in with Fox, fitting in with Sabonis and playing off of them. Despite the fact that he had the capabilities of being the leading scorer if he wanted to, he seamlessly kind of stepped into his role because of the time that he played with Luka. I'm just curious, over the course of watching his rookie season in Sacramento, did you see similarities in his development this year to the development that you saw over the years that he was at Iowa?
Absolutely. He came in a unique position because we were a 2 seed the year before, and we had our essentially entire starting lineup back. So he was coming off the bench, and okay, I'll come off the bench. Now, he did play essentially starters minutes in many ways, and he was the first guy to start if somebody else couldn't. But like you said, we had the leading scorer in the country. We had a guy that has made more threes than anybody else in the history of Division I basketball except for J.J. Redick. So he's Jordan Bohannon's number 2. Joe Wieskamp led the nation in three-point shooting that year at 51%. Connor McCaffery led the nation in assist turnover ratio that year. And so the roster was pretty well set. So the key for him was to just come in and, okay, well, you're going to start. Okay, you're not going to start. Okay, you might get 21 game. We're going to put you on Ron Harper defensively. And it was just kind of amazing, and I think you saw it. He just accepts whatever responsibility you give him. He doesn't fight you on anything. I'll guard who you need me to guard. I'll understand the game plan. And I think when you look at rookies in that league, the maturity with which he will have approached his craft is really critical. He's going to study the scouting report. He's going to watch film. He's not going to be running around town. He's just not. And even if you're on the road, we're in New York. No, we're not doing that. We're locked in here. We're trying to win a championship. We're trying to get to the playoffs, which they hadn't done in a while. They did that. And what a series it was. And they came real close to advancing. And I think you look at that team next year and say, okay, why not them? To make a deep run and potentially win the whole thing. So, I'm excited for him. I'm excited to continue to watch it, but I am not surprised at all that he did what he did. And I don't think you are either.
How well did he respond to your coaching over his time at Iowa? Because Mike Brown would at times call him out publicly. Mike would make jokes about chewing him out. Most of the time it was he'd chew or cuss him out because he wasn't shooting the ball enough or being aggressive enough. And Mike was telling him, hey, we know your skill set, let it fly type thing. But he always responded to what Mike Brown needed from him. I remember a press conference where Mike started out the press conference. I think it was after a win. And Mike said, we need better rebounding from Keegan. And over the next string of games, Keegan had 7, 6, 7, 8, something like that rebounds, and just responded immediately. So the response that he had to Mike Brown really jumped off the page to me watching him in person. But for you, it seems like something that he's been doing his entire career is responding to coaching.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that, I don't know if you'd say it's unique, but what do you need me to do, coach? Got it. You didn't have to repeat it. I never, and I get asked this all the time, when you're going through the draft process, a lot of the NBA scouts will say, okay, how did he respond when you had to really jump him? They asked me that about him. They asked me about that about his brother, Kris. And I said, I never did. And I don't know if they believe me or not, but I never raised my voice to Keegan Murray for the 2 years I had him. I never raised my voice to Kris Murray the 3 years I had him. I would encourage him, kind of like Mike did. I remember early in his freshman year, he was seemingly a little overwhelmed with a scouting report before a big game, one of those packed house national TV games. It's early in his career. And I said to him, I just said, listen, man, you're going to forget something out there. We give you the game plan. It's something to hold on to, but you're going to forget something. Just hoop, just attack the rim, shoot the ball, drive the ball, block a shot. If you miss a shot or you turn it over, run back, play defense. Don't overthink this thing. It's not a game of perfect. And he just is one of those guys over the course of 40 minutes or the course of 48 minutes, he's going to do way more good than anything else. And he's always going to put a premium on winning. He wants that team to win more so than he's worried about himself.
Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is extremely important for everybody, in my opinion. Therapy is extremely important for everybody. No matter what you are going through, therapy can help you. Your problem is not too big, and this is more important, in my opinion. Your problems are not too small. See, I was someone with therapy that didn't think that my problems were a big deal, or I didn't have any weighing depression issues or suicidal issues or anything of the extreme. But I did, of course, have my problems and have my issues. And my marriage had the problems and issues that we needed to talk about. That's why therapy was so important for me. I finally gave therapy a try during COVID, believe it or not. And I'm still seeing my therapist today. I very much enjoy and look forward to my therapy sessions every single month. Therapy is phenomenal, and you need to give it a try at least once or twice just to talk through some of your issues and see if you can get the help that you don't even know that you need. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. And it's important that you find and match with the therapist that is perfect for you. You can find more balance to your overall life with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. What was your overall takeaways or just your thoughts and breakdowns of his performance over the course of the 7-game series with the Golden State Warriors? Because the first 3 games he struggled, didn't really make much of an impact. It seemed like game 4, that switch really flipped for him. He kind of figured things out. And over the remainder of the series, he was arguably the second best player on the Sacramento Kings for the remainder of that series. I watched him start game 5, and his first 2 baskets that he scored were in transition, putting his shoulder down, going right into the chest of the defense and scoring at the rim. And then he started to establish his outside shot, which was really exciting for me. Now, unfortunately, in that game, he was the hottest King to start the game, and then the Kings didn't get him a shot for the other 3 quarters, which made no sense to me. I'm sure some of that was on Keegan, some of that was on the team, but whatever. But over the course of the series, we really saw the development and maturity of Keegan. We saw him figure it out. What was your perspective on his play over that 7-game series?
I looked at it like this. They have a pretty impressive collection of talent. And it might be, okay, well, Keegan didn't do much today. Well, maybe that's because Malik Monk had a big game and he played more. Or Kevin Huerter had a big game and he played more. And then the next game, Keegan gets going and he plays more. I mean, that's what the great teams have. But you're right. I mean, he'll be at his best, I think, when he's driving the ball, putting his shoulder into you and scoring near the basket, which sets up his pull-up game and his 3-ball. But there's a lot of guys on that team that want to eat, and they're capable of getting a bucket at any time. And you think about it, a lot of times you only have 1 or 2 guys you can ISO. They've got plenty of guys that have that ability, and I think Keegan's one of them. But I think that's the beauty of who they are, and the beauty of him, because he's not going to be sulking because he had 2 games where he didn't get as many shots or play as many minutes. All right, coach, you play me more minutes the next game, I'll get 23. And that's why I love him, and I think that's why Mike loves him.
I wasn't sure over the first 3 games, and I was talking about it on the podcast. Like when he was struggling, it was like, is it the moment? Is it like you're talking about the playing time? Is it what the Golden State Warriors are doing, trying to take him away? And I had to think back to, this is a rookie playing against the defending champions on the biggest stage that you can play in, and he deserves the time to figure it out. Heck, just like so many other players, there are 5 or 6 players on the Kings that this was their first playoff series ever. Keegan just so happens to be a rookie going through this and figuring it out. But one thing that stood out to me is Keegan lived up to his word. And what I mean by that is all season long, he's been telling us, hey, I always have confidence. Like I always have confidence in my ability. And he continued to shoot the basketball and shoot off the dribble and take shots and execute his game plan, even if the shots weren't falling the entire playoff series. And then finally, those just started to drop. What did you see about the confidence of Keegan Murray and the fearlessness of a rookie against the defending champs on that stage to just keep shooting his work and work his way through it? I'm sure it helped him that his teammates and his coaches were telling him, hey, we'll live with it. Keep shooting.
Well, I think you're right. I think that's absolutely critical that you get that kind of support from your coaching staff and your teammates, especially the veteran guys. So clearly that happened. But again, I know him. I've known him since 4th grade. He doesn't rattle. He is going to be phenomenally respectful of what the Golden State Warriors have done, who's on that roster. I mean, he knows who Draymond Green is. Okay. But, he's still going to attack, and he's still going to be aggressive, and he's still going to be confident enough in his own skin to go make plays. And that's why I love him. And that's why I think, like you said, when we started this whole discussion, is like, okay, let's look at what he is. Let's look at who he is. But where's he going? Mm-hmm. And I think we all can agree that there's more in there. I mean, like he was really good. All rookie team, set a record. It's hard to set records in that league. Okay. But now, all right, can you be a 20 and 8, 20 and 9 guy and be on the All-Star team? The answer to that question is yes.
Domantas Sabonis really seemed to take Keegan under his wing too and work with him a lot. And Sabonis is a very animated player on the floor, off the floor, quiet, one of the nicest players on the planet. But on the floor, you could see Sabonis sometimes pull him aside and tell him what he needs to do. But after good plays, wrap his arm around him. What do you think that relationship did for Keegan and what Sabonis could bring for Keegan?
I just think that is awesome. When you see that, a guy the caliber of Sabonis with what he's accomplished, really caring about his teammates and recognizing that, hey, we need this guy. We need this guy to come through for us, and I can help him. And that's what he did. He stepped up as a veteran should, and encouraged him and helped build his confidence. And he was a different player because of it. And the beauty of that is now, a couple of years from now, Keegan will be doing that for somebody else. And that's quite frankly how it's supposed to work, right?
I wanted to get your perspective on Sacramento Kings basketball now that you followed it a little bit closer. Not necessarily what the guys are doing on the floor, but kind of the atmosphere, because Keegan Murray happens to be part of the team that finally brings the Sacramento Kings back to the playoffs. How quickly Mike Brown and Monty McNair and that organization turned things around after the longest NBA drought in playoff history. But I mean, we have Iowa fans that were showing up to Sacramento Kings games in Sacramento. So many of I was trying to look it up to describe it correctly, but the Iowa yellow half and then half Sacramento Kings purple Keegan Murray jerseys that we saw rocking out there. And I have to find out where they are so I can pick up one because they're really, really clean. But Iowa fans really embraced Sacramento Kings basketball and became part of this fan base that never really went anywhere, is so well known, and finally was back on the national showcase with the playoffs. But what did you think of just, and maybe even comparing Sacramento Kings basketball? De'Aaron Fox has called Sacramento like a college town, very similar to Kentucky with the crowd and it being kind of a one major sports town and how they embrace the Kings. I was just curious your perspective on what Kings basketball was this year that Keegan got to be a part of.
Well, I've always been impressed with that fan base. I mean, going back to the Chris Webber days, Stojakovic, they had some really good teams and they stayed loyal even when they weren't making the playoffs. I mean, they're showing up and it's loud and it's an incredible atmosphere, awesome atmosphere, quite frankly. So to see Keegan become part of that and be part of that growth and see that community really embrace this team and love this team, that was something to really see. And, I think I would have predicted that the Iowa fans act the way they did. And I think for a couple of reasons, because, they look, as much as Keegan's a Hawkeye, all right, he's one of their own. Dad played here. He grew up in Cedar Rapids. From kindergarten on, he's coming to Carver Hawkeye Arena. And then one day be able to wear that jersey and then be the highest draft pick ever. And he goes, we had a lot of first round picks here, but nobody was number 4. And also to be a humble character guy, the way he is, you just have everybody rooting for him. And that city was ready to explode with what that team did this year. And I think you're right. I mean, there's a lot of things that came together, but like I said, when I probably spent 20 minutes talking with Coach Brown in the summer in Vegas. And I said, of course, he's had a terrific career and won a couple rings, as an assistant coach. So you kind of could see where this thing was headed. But he had the right personality, the right temperament, the right experience for that team. Monty was phenomenal. As thorough job as I've seen from an entire staff of people going through the process and figuring out, okay, we're going to take Keegan. And when you're picking 4, there's a number of guys you're looking at. And there's so many things that factor into, okay, why do we pick him? Because you don't want to screw up the 4th pick. You don't want to be like, hey, they took him 4. Look who went 8. And, they talk about it for 15 years. So those guys did their homework. And they put a team together that's going to be fun to watch for a long time. And I'm thrilled for Keegan to be such a major part of it. It'd be interesting to see if they could end up getting Kris. That would be fun too.
That leads perfectly into what I was about to ask you before I let you go. So Kris Murray, the cycle starts again. And Keegan, I asked Keegan in his exit interview about what he's going to do with Kris, or how he's paying attention with Kris. And he said he's like, the next day he was starting to work out with Kris and help Kris with the combine process and everything like that. And Kris really emerged, and Sacramento Kings fans have been keeping close tabs on Kris Murray and his season. Now the Kings are in a little different position now that they've made the playoffs. They're not a lottery team, which is a welcome sight here, even though it kind of, it's a different kind of summer for us. So the general belief is that Kris is probably not going to be there when the Sacramento Kings are selecting, although fingers are crossed that all other teams maybe miss on Kris, or just don't pay attention or forget about him a little bit. But I'm just wanting to get your perspective on Kris and the kind of player that he is and how he could help the Sacramento Kings or any NBA team, and what he's going to bring to the NBA this year.
Well, the interesting thing for him, actually for both, they're constantly being compared with each other. And it's understandable. They're identical twins. And they're best of friends. I mean, they give each other a hard time. It's hilarious to watch. But, I mean, they're as close as two brothers could possibly be. So, obviously, Keegan's really hoping for the best for his brother. It'd be really interesting and cool to see them play together. But I think when you look at Kris, and I've always viewed them as different. And yes, there are similarities. They're about the same size. They can both shoot threes. They're both versatile. They both have similar personalities, not identical, but similar in terms of incredibly mature, zero maintenance, hard workers, great teammates. But their games are a little bit different. And I think Kris really wanted the opportunity to play this year without Keegan. It would have been easy for him to take a two-way. He would have gotten a two-way last year. You know, Keegan goes 4. Kris would have probably gone in the second round somewhere and would have been guaranteed a two-way deal. Most college kids now take a two-way deal if you're offered one. He said, no, I'm going to go back. I want to do this myself, and I want to be a first-round pick. So I am so proud of him for that, taking that stand. And, you know, I'm proud of his agent for not saying, yo, man, take the money. He's like, no, bet on yourself. Go back to school. Be a first-round pick. And that's exactly what happened. So, I mean, it would be awesome to have them both on the same team. You know, it would be awesome to have them not on the same team and just kind of create and carve their own path where they are. So I'm just excited for him, you know, when the draft comes, because he's going to go in the first round, you know, maybe late lottery, but if not, right after that.
Well, Coach, I mentioned a lot of Iowa fans became Kings fans this year, but also the opposite happened. A lot of Kings fans became Iowa fans because of the amazing job that you did with Keegan, preparing him to have as much success as he had here in Sacramento. And that's why there's such an eagerness to bring Kris in, because he's an Iowa product as well. So congratulations to you for the work that you've done. What Keegan does is a testament to your program as well. To have you back here on the Locked On Kings podcast for the third time in basically a year is a real treat for me. I also got to speak with you and spend some time with you in Vegas a little bit. Hope to see you again. But I appreciate you. Thanks for what you did. And you're always welcome in Sacramento to come catch a game in person in the Golden One Center.
Well, I have to do that, man. I have to get out there. I look forward to seeing you again this summer. I will be in Vegas supporting both Keegan and Kris. I doubt Keegan will be playing this summer, but Kris will be. But it was great to see you. I got a chance to see Monty out there, and like I said, Coach Brown. So look forward to seeing those guys again. And we're all Kings fans here. We appreciate you guys being Hawk fans. And hey, let's do this again next year. Hopefully, Kris will be a King. We'll see.
It was a pleasure having Coach McCaffery back here on the Locked On Kings podcast. Hope to do it again in the future. Maybe after we're talking about Kris Murray being a King. How cool would that be? You know, I had a conversation with Scott Moak, the PA announcer for the Sacramento Kings. I might have shared this before. I can't remember. He's the voice that you hear during the intro of the Locked On Kings podcast. And of course, the amazing voice that you hear ringing through the Golden One Center. Scott was sharing, or I was chatting with him, and of course he does the Keegan Murray, the call and response with the Kings crowd that everybody loves so much. And I was asking him, if the Kings draft Kris doesn't have 2 syllables in his first name. does Kris not get the Keegan Murray chant treatment? And he was telling me, like, no, he wouldn't. It doesn't work. So I don't know if that could fly. If Keegan Murray's getting the Keegan Murray call and response chant, and then, of course, Scott would still embellish Kris Murray's name in a fun way, but Kris doesn't get the same treatment, I think we would have to find a way to add another syllable to Kris's first name, just so we could do the call and response with Kris as well. But it'd be really cool to have Kris here in Sacramento. And if it's the right pick for Monte McNair and he's there, of course, Monte will make that pick, or maybe he trades the pick. We'll have to wait and see what he does with this offseason. And of course, for continued coverage of this offseason, no matter what the Kings do around the draft, around free agency, with trades and things like that, summer league, everything this offseason, we of course will keep close tabs of here on the Locked On Kings podcast. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Fran McCaffery, and I hope you'll continue to join me for future interviews and future episodes over the course of the remainder of this offseason. Appreciate your support. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.